I literally can't believe the Coliseum let us come in there and film. The Coliseum hasn't allowed anyone to film there for half a century. It was like, you know, what are the odds they're going to allow us to go there? But Italy is a film-loving country, and luckily they loved my movies, and therefore they welcomed us. They opened their arms and welcomed us.
Lucas Foster, to his credit, did almost the impossible, and it's sort of something that you put him in the Producerial Hall of Fame. He somehow got us the Coliseum for 3 days of photography. Never in my wildest imagination did I think that we were going to be shooting a film here.
Obviously it's amazing. I didn't have any idea that we would actually be able to get it. It was just a dream at that point. And luckily, 4 or 5 months of heavy American persuasion and little charm, and here we are.
It's the Coliseum. How's it closed?
It was very restrictive on us. The limitations we were given were we could have the Coliseum, but the daylight hours we were allowed to have were 45 minutes in the morning and an hour and 15 minutes in the afternoon over a course of 3 days. And we really had 3 days worth of work to do. So to only have 2 hours a day to actually be able to film seemed almost impossible.
Well, they've given us great access to people who run it, but it's a public space and it's an antiquity. We can't put anything down on the ground, really. Normally a film crew would come in and lay miles and miles of cable. We would have dolly track, we would have all kinds of stuff, generators and things, so it's been tricky. The sound recordist is wearing the sound recorder because we can't put it on the ground and he can't have his normal cart and whatever, so we've been at the apex of trying to figure out innovative ways to just pretty much carry everything on our backs and be mobile.
Honestly, my first reaction to the Coliseum was exactly like Millie, the character. I walked in and I was like, whoa.
You're walking into the Coliseum as the sun is coming up, and you have the whole thing to yourselves, and it was just a very sort of magical feeling. Definitely not your typical day at work.
A little bit more. But we would sort of work everything out in the middle of the night, and I had 4 camera crews, and there was always a camera shooting. We were building into our day like, okay, that camera's gonna be out for 4 minutes reloading. Okay, while that's reloading, it moves out of the way, hides around the corner, and there's a camera up in the corner that was hidden from the Steadicam that rolls into position, and it shoots its angle. I had second unit director and third unit directors shooting in other parts of the Coliseum, other details, with no margin for error.
There's a few more steps.
There's an action component and a non-action component, and the non-action component was entirely done, in Rome. And then there were things with serious amount of damage that we were going to be inflicting on the Coliseum, and because it was an action sequence that obviously could not be done in the middle of an antique. So Oliver Scholl, my production designer, rebuilt the lower portion of the Coliseum in the largest soundstage that they have in Toronto.
If you have stunt work, you need to rig things specifically. You have to make walls that look like they're real hard, but they're actually foam pieces. And obviously you can't do that in the real Colosseum. So you're going to pick what parts of the Colosseum are real in the real location. That gives you the scope. And then you're going to define what areas you need to build in order to get the action right. The most important part, of course, was actually having gone to Rome, and we had a tour with a gentleman who was in charge of the restoration work in the Colosseum. There's different layers of construction types and different restoration works that went on. So we just got a lot of documentation of how was it built, why was it built that way, what was the functionality. And once we had these, and I came back from Rome with like 4,500 images, just myself, that I took there. So that's a lot of research material. What we usually do is, once I have like an idea of the general size, I do scribbles and try to do the blocking for where the main action might be or what might be required. We also did a lot of 3D previs on this. We have a lot of set designers working in 3D now, which helps a lot because you get precise measurements, but also you can move a camera around and see what you're going to get. And it's the total construction time for this set, several months that it takes to build something like this.
Because we had been given such incredible access to the Coliseum, Oliver was able to do a phenomenal job recreating the most minute details of what actually exists in the labyrinth level of the Coliseum.
It was identical, down to which side of the rock the moss was supposed to be growing on.
So are you speaking German so I understand you?
Everybody set, ready, and...
It's very difficult when you're doing a sequence like this, when we, have such a large structure like the Colosseum where we filmed, and then we've got, although this looks a large set, it's relatively a small set. So it's very difficult mix and matching the two, and we've got to be very careful that we don't do certain camera styles here on stage that weren't possible at the actual Colosseum. So although we might be using a crane at some point, the only reason is to get a high vantage point, and CG will give it that handheld feel afterwards, because it's really important to keep the same sort of flavor, otherwise it's going to stand out a mile.
I really feel like, as a filmmaker, all the films I did up until now prepared me for this movie, and that had I not gone through what I'd gone through, I never would have survived the Coliseum.
It was amazing. I think it was something that, everyone sort of shared, was this sort of sense of being in awe of where we were filming.
I'm so proud of what we accomplished in Rome. For the amount of money we spent, the amount of time we had, I was faced with, this impossible challenge, and somehow I rose up and met it. I'm just trying to get a piece of you guys tumbling on the ground. So just make it as messy as possible here that you're rolling around. It's hard to imagine a film where the first units traveled more places than this movie. I can't even imagine a story that would sort of accommodate that many locations. It's just that we happen to have teleporters, so if you don't have people who can teleport, how would the story go to that many places?
There's one version of this film, and that could have been the whole film being shot in Canada with a green screen behind them. It was incredibly important to us that the teleportation to other cities in other worlds be real, be grounded, be textured, be interactive with a real environment, not only in terms of the audience's relationship to these places, which is incredibly important, but also the characters' relationship to these places. We wanted the actors to feel like they're really interacting on a Roman street, as opposed to interacting on a Canadian street with Roman, picture cars.
I think that that's how it should be. I'd rather, conserve the money and be clever about how we plan the movie and go there for real rather than fake it in a computer. This is kind of like how they used to do it, many years ago, and before the advent of computers. You didn't have a choice. You had to go somewhere. That's the essence of filmmaking, is going to the real place, and trying to create the magic.
This is a movie about, someone who can go anywhere. They can go there, blink of an eye. A dialogue scene that starts here in New York City could continue for 4 lines of dialogue in Tokyo, and then go to Rome for a minute, and because that's what these characters can do. We went to Tokyo for 2 weeks, we were in Italy for 10 days, we were in Prague for a couple of days. Each one of these places with a crew that only spoke that language. France, London, Egypt, Baja, Louisiana, Toronto, Montreal, Detroit, Ann Arbor, New York City, Los Angeles. When you look at the movie, I don't think anyone's ever combined sort of the traveling that the Bond movies or the Bourne movies do with the kind of visual effects that we were doing.